Unit 13 is going to start off with things that the things that you already know about. It starts off with stuff that you learned in 5th grade and 6th grade. You saw some of it in 7th and 8th grade. So it starts off with a whole lot of review. I'm not going to have to explain a lot of the first section or the second section. Once we get into the 3rd section and the 4th section, there's going to be a basic one problem with 5 different parts. And so we are getting into the performance task type of situations. That's what this whole unit is critical thinking of how to figure out things. And so later on it's going to get harder. But right now this first section is supposed to be one of the easiest sections for you because it comes from 5th and 6th grade. Things you're supposed to remember. Because it was so long ago, I just want to remind you, a base is not necessarily the bottom. The base is the thing that is across from the apex. So if we're talking about a pyramid, the base might be the left side if it's across from the highest point. That's what an apex is. Or it's parallel and congruent to the other base in a prism, which has 2 bases. That's what we're going to be talking about. You'll see that in a little bit. Doesn't matter which faces are the bases in rectangular prisms, because if you're talking about a box, the base could be the front and the back. It could be the left side, the right side, or the bottom or the top, because they're parallel to each other. Pyramids have an apex over a polygon base, named by its base shape. Cones have an apex over a circular base, and prisms are named by its base shape as well. I say that because that's review. You're going to have to name several shapes on the first page of this worksheet. For example, if it's a pyramid, it might be a square pyramid. It might be a triangular pyramid. It might be a pentagonal pyramid. It might be a hexagonal pyramid, depending on how many sides the base has. You might have to count how many sides it has to be able to name the pyramid. If it's a cone, circular base, you just call it a cone. But if it's a prism, it might be a triangular prism. It might be a rectangular prism. It might be a pentagonal prism. It might be a trapezoidal prism. We'll look at all those different possibilities on this worksheet. Page 2, you're going to have to draw some of these shapes 3-dimensionally. Super difficult for some of you. And I know that some of you cannot draw. I also know some of you are really good at drawing things. I see some of your artwork on your notes pages. It's quite impressive, to be honest with you. Okay? But for those of you who aren't good artistes, don't worry. Just try your best, and I'll say, okay, you get credit for your homework. Other things that I need you to remember. Base and height are always perpendicular to each other. When you're finding the base and height of a rectangle, find the ones that are perpendicular to each other, the ones that create a 90-degree angle. Same with the triangles. They have to be perpendicular to each other. And circles, the area formula is pi r squared. Okay, so let's get into some examples. Here's your first example. It's on your worksheet. Number 7. Classify each solid. That means give its name and then highlight the base or the base is. So if I'm looking at number 7 and I want to classify it, what I have to do is I have to look at what shape is being matched on both sides. And I hope you can see that the front and the back are the same. I'm going to highlight it here. I'm shading this in. The front of this shape is the shape of a trapezoid. It matches in the back of the shape, and they notice the front and the back are going in the same direction. So this is called a trapezoidal. You add the words AL, the 2 letters AL, trapezoidal prism. Because this base and the other base that's on the back side are congruent and parallel to each other. That's the front and that's the back. It said highlight the base. All I needed to do is highlight the front or the back because those are the ones that are the same as each other. That's it. First answer. Second answer is you highlighting the base. Just shade it in. With your pencil is fine. 1 through 12 should be pretty darn easy. You have to name it and you shade a base. 13 through 24, on the other hand, might be a little more difficult because you're expected to draw these shapes. The directions state, draw the figure and highlight the base. So you have to draw a cylinder. Now, if you do not know how to draw these, I picked 3 examples just to give you an idea of how to draw each of these types of shapes. A cylinder is like a Coke can or a water bottle. It's a cylinder. It has a circular base. I would draw your circular base first. I would draw it something like that. Usually, I try to draw the top of it as well that is parallel to it. I usually will draw the top and the bottom first and sort of at an angle so they make some of these looks like an oval and another oval. Then I connect the sides. And then if you have an eraser and you want to get fancy, because this is good enough. This is good enough for me. If you want to get fancy though, what I sometimes then do is I draw a dotted thing that it would be, oh, it's at the back of the shape. I can't see it, so I make it as a dotted line. I can see the top, and I can see the back of the top. I can see the side, I can see the side, I can see the front, but this would be behind, and so then I make it dotted. If you want to go that fancy, go for it. Draw a figure, highlight the base. Here's my base. The bottom. You could also, since the top or the bottom is the base, they're parallel to each other, you can highlight both. Well, how do you do a cone? I would still do the circular base. And then you got to get an apex. An apex is a point that's above the shape. So I do this circular shape and I put a dot above it. And then what I do is I actually go from the apex to the outside edge, from the apex to the outside edge. That literally is good enough for me. Now, if you want to get fancy with it, just like I did before over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, only draw the front, and have a dotted back. And then we have to highlight the base. The base is that circle that's on the bottom of this cone. A prism with a hexagonal base. Well, what's a hexagon? A hexagon has 6 sides. It's like a pencil. So a lot of times I'll draw the hexagon first. And because those are the bases, I usually will draw 2 of them sort of spread out from each other. Try to make them the exact same size. Hexagon, hexagon. And then what I do is I connect top left to top left, top right to top right. If you want to get fancy, that's good enough for me, by the way. That's a hexagonal prism. Then I shade in the base or the other base, because it says highlight the base, so we just shade it in. That's it. If you're trying to draw a hexagonal pyramid, you'd start off with the bottom being a hexagon and then draw an apex and then connect the corners. It's pretty simple. But I know some of you are going to struggle with drawing, so just try your best. Lastly, there's going to be some review questions on how to find the area of several shapes. I gave you the formulas that you probably already know because it comes from 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. In case you forgot, they're there. So we have a triangle, number 26. We have a base and we have a height. The formula for the area of a triangle is half the base times the height. So the base here and the height have to be perpendicular. I know that they are because of this right angle symbol. The base is 11. The height is 5.4. So if I want to find the area rounded to the nearest tenth, I plug it all in. 0.5 times 11 times 5.4 to the nearest tenth is 29.7. And if I had this as miles and miles, then what you would notice is that it becomes miles squared. And area is always in square units, because it says include the correct units with your answer. So if I don't include the correct units, and I actually had a meeting this morning with some Math 3 teachers who will mark you wrong if you do not include the correct units on your targets next year. So for those of you who are ready for next year's math class, don't forget to include your units. You will be marked wrong by the Math 3 teachers. They are all a little bit more strict about that. I'm going to stop your notes right there.